In this lesson, we are going to complete our Ansible playbook. We will add 2 more Ansible roles, and these roles will automate all steps that we executed manually in previous lesson. This is Ansible directory structure we have so far. In Nginx folder are Ansible steps to automate setup of Nginx. In DB folder are Ansible steps to automate database setup. As I just said, I will add 2 more Ansible roles. One role for Gunicorn part and one role for Django application part. Let's do that. This is our new Ansible role directory structure. Gunicorn role, besides its standard tasks main.yaml file, also contains templates directory. In templates directory I placed 3 files. I won't explain the meaning of these files because I'm sure you already know them from previous lesson. Same thing basically is with app role. Tasks main.yaml file is as a standard for any role, and templates directory contains a production.py, which is a Django settings file. Behind the scene, I already filled in information of configuration file with exactly the same content we used in previous lesson. We will adjust content of these files along the way. Let's turn our attention to the most interesting part of this lesson, to main.yaml files. We will start with this one. Main.yaml file of app role. When automating with Ansible, it is a good practice to have step-by-step overview of what we want to do. So here I listed 6 steps we did manually in previous lesson. For each of these steps, we will need to introduce an Ansible step. First thing, we cloned our repository. Then we took care of config settings production.py file. Ansible will use this template file for production.py. Afterwards, we created a Python virtual environment. First 3 steps are really easy, and I'm sure that everybody will grasp them quickly. Next 3 steps though are a little bit trickier. They are tricky because for each of the 3 subsequent steps we will need to indicate Python virtual environment under which these steps need to be executed. Because when I installed manually, before running the pip install command, I did this. In case of Ansible, it won't run source command. Instead, we'll indicate to Ansible command the current Python virtual environment under which to run specific command. This one or this one or this one. Besides, our production.py reads some environment variables. So we need to keep this in mind when running migrate and collect static commands. Let's do this. Git command is fairly easy. In Ansible Git command, we have a couple of arguments, like repo, which is basically URL to the repository we are cloning from, destination, where we want our project to be cloned to, and version. Argument version is basically a Git branch. We will clone from master branch. Pay attention to this argument, become user. If we don't specify it, Ansible will clone the repository into this folder and assign this folder to root. Why? It is because in our deploy demo Ansible playbook, here we have become true. And this argument instructs Ansible to run all commands on remote machine on John system as sudo. So whenever we do not want sudo, or we want sudo but with other user than root, we need to overwrite this behavior, so to speak. This is exactly what become user does. It instructs Ansible to run this command with this user. The next step is pretty easy. We need to take care of config settings production file, and we will use Ansible's template command. Ansible will copy production.py file from templates folder, this one. So this main file that I'm open here is this one, And when I say in template source production, it will use the production file from this directory, from templates directory. And we instruct Ansible to copy this template file into this place. I want to remind you that in this repository there's no production file, so we create a new file, we don't override anything. Next, we'll automate these two steps in one shot. Here's the command, which is pretty obvious. Virtual environment argument points to the directory where virtual environment will be created. If requirements argument is present, then Ansible pip command will install libraries from that requirements .freeze file. And virtual command instructs Ansible to create virtual environment using this command. And also notice that we repeat ourselves a lot. This path is repeated in several places. Here as well, and here as well. So it's a strong call to add a variable here. So this is exactly what I'll do. I'll place this path into a variable. And now let's introduce our new role in deploy demo playbook. We call it app. And also I added a new variable and I call it project dir. Now if I run this playbook with this command, it will run each and every role one by one, and that may be not really what you want, especially at this stage. A cool thing what you can do here is to add to each role tags. So I will add nginx tag to nginx role, database tag to database, and app tag to application. And in this way, when I want to run Ansible playbook, I will just mention tags app, and it will run only roles with matched tags. In this case, it will be our app. On John systems, I renamed previously created folders so that we can now recreate these folders using Ansible. Let's do that. Notice tags argument. Let's check what happened on John system. Right, the new folder was created. Notice that it was created as user John, which is already good. Let's go inside. I see an issue. Python virtual environment was created a root. We'll need to fix it. Before fixing this issue, let's check if production file was created. Yes, production file is there. Cool. Migrate and collect static commands get a little bit tricky. Migrate command here might look like huge, but don't worry, it is only this part which is important. As I told you before, we need to specify virtual environment where this command will run. When running any Django command, settings module needs to be specified. Notice the dot notation. Another very important point is become user, which needs to be John. The biggest part of this whole chunk of code is environment part. In your projects, you might not need this part. For this demo project, it is required because in my production.py, I make use of environment variables. Please don't confuse environment from here, which is Python virtual environment, and the one from here, which is shell environment. All these are shell, or in my case, because I use bash, they are bash environment variables. Basically the same thing goes with collect static part. It is exactly the same code, with the only difference that instead of command migrate, I place here command collect static. Now let's run these commands. notice that static folder was recreated as John user, which basically means that this command runs successfully. The Gunicorn role is really easy. First of all, we need to make sure that this directory exists. Afterwards, we just need to copy this file, Gunicorn environment, to this location, Gunicorn conf.py again to this location, and lesson service we need to copy it to etc systemd system location. And all these steps will be performed with Ansible's template module or command. And after doing all this, we'll just need to restart Gunicorn service. Here I am in main file of Gunicorn role, and the first step is to make sure that etc lessons directory exists. So instead of mentioning everywhere etc lessons, I created an environment instead, etc dir. So here I make sure that this path is a directory and it exists. And then in the next steps, I just copy template gunicorn conf.py to this folder using Ansible's template command. Same here, Gunicorn environment, which is this one here, I copied to etc dir location, and same thing with Gunicorn lesson service. I use this template and I copy to etc systemd system location. And the last step of Gunicorn role is to restart systemd service named lessons. It is also very important that my gunicorn.environment file, this one, contains all environment variables that I need to use in production.py. For different projects, if production.py does not use environment variables, the only thing you will need in gunicorn.environment file is this line, which defines Django settings module. And another neat optimization which we might do is in lesson service. In this file, instead of mentioning this long path, it makes perfect sense to replace them with variable. In main playbook I already added the new role, and now let's run this new role. Great, it completed without any errors. Great, service is up and running, and the last thing that we still need to do is to make HTTP secure. We will do this in the next lesson, which will conclude the Django in production from 0 to hero series. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Thanks for watching.